It's a name that instantly conjures the American spirit.
It's a road of dreams. It's a road of determination.
Route 66, adventure, migration, and the pursuit of freedom.
It's a part of what makes America distinctive.
The way west from Chicago to Los Angeles.
A whole melting pot of stories, of people's lives.
Spanning 2,448 miles across 8 states.
It made our communities what they were and what they are today.
It's not just pavement.
It is a living, breathing history of America.
Its legacy continues.
No, it's just a road, but what's a road without people on it?
Proving that the Mother Road story is still being told.
A living symbol of all the parts of America.
This is Celebrate New Mexico, 100 years of Route 66. Thank you for joining us.
For a century, it has been the artery pumping life into the heart of America.
Just saying the name Route 66 still conjures up images of neon signs, chrome fenders, and endless possibilities.
And tonight, we don't just kick off a celebration, we ignite the engine for a journey back through time.
We are taking you on a ride through history, explaining why this is more than just lines and pavement.
The story begins not with concrete, but with dirt and ambition.
To understand this icon, we have to look much further back to the dusty, humble beginnings that paved the way for the world's most famous highway.
Route 66 has its origins centuries ago. We'll find it in the animal trails that went along through the canyons, that found the natural, easiest way to move. And then we'll find the native communities following those animals on a hunt.
By 1849, word of gold in California sparked interest. Wagons leaving Fort Smith, Arkansas, making their way west, filled with prospectors hoping to strike it rich.
It was wild in those days.
Travel was difficult, much of the area uncharted, so the federal government stepped in.
We needed a land route, and Edward Beale and his camels started out from Albuquerque and made his way across what would be the 35th parallel, what would be the railroad.
As tracks were laid, towns sprung up, providing lodging and food for a tourist industry beginning to take shape. The late 1800s, a new form of transportation emerged. The automobile, giving people the ability to travel more freely and on their own schedule.
In 1905, there were 23,000 cars in the United States.
But Henry Ford's Model T changed the game by 1913, creating a faster, more standardized production process, driving down costs and making cars affordable for all Americans.
By 1927, there were 24 million cars, and all those drivers wanted to use their cars. They wanted someplace to go, and particularly they were interested in exploring areas that they had never seen before.
Many had their eyes set on the West Coast, but our country still lacked good roads and services that would allow people to make the journey.
There was no signage on these old roads. You had to know where you were going. You got directions like, okay, there are 2 big trees over there, and at that place you turn left.
A need for organization put pressure on the government.
They began planning a national highway system for the 1924 Federal Highway Act. They decided that what they needed was to take over the railroads grade, and they did.
The Numbered Highways Act in 1926 sought to establish linked highways throughout the country that people could easily jump on and off.
Cyrus Avery, a businessman from Tulsa, was serving on the highway board. He was tasked with developing a system. At the same time, he not only wanted a highway to pass through his town, but to elevate smaller communities.
Cyrus Avery, alongside his friend John Woodruff, based in Springfield, Missouri, decided that what they needed was a road and a road number that would work.
Originally pushing to become Highway 60, numbers ending in a 0 were reserved for the nation's most crucial routes. This ignited a battle with the governor of Kentucky, who argued his highway was already established and more important.
So they settled on Route 66
a number easy to say and easy to remember. Officially commissioned November 11, 1926, the diagonal course was revolutionary, linking hundreds of rural communities, giving them access to the national grid and connecting the industrial Midwest to the booming West Coast. But the path was far from smooth.
It was all dirt and made from the National Old Trails highways that were there before.
There was the incredibly hard work of paving roads, of connecting roads that weren't connected before. So for at least the first 10 years and even 20 years later, roads were still being paved to make sure that travelers could get through to their final destination reasonably, let's say, and maybe not on dirt or gravel.
At the same time,
So a matter of politics, let's say.
Route 66, the center of controversy in New Mexico.
The bitter 1926 gubernatorial election.
Incumbent Arthur Hannett had just been defeated by Richard Dillon.
Governor A.T. Hannett decided to cast some revenge.
Dillon's thriving sheep farm in Encino sat on one of the only east-west routes through the state. So Hannett
He called together the state's engineers. Supposedly, he took a ruler.
drawing a line.
It went straight west from Santa Rosa, through Klein's Corners, through Edgewood, into Albuquerque.
The new route would bring more traffic through Albuquerque while bypassing Santa Fe and the southern route, potentially impacting Dillon's business. Hannett ordered crews to construct 69 miles of highway in just 31 days. The work was rough, cutting through pinon forests and grading roads in the cold winter months. Once Dillon was sworn in as governor, January 1st, 1927, he sent a crew to stop the construction, but a storm prevented them from arriving on time, and the work was already complete. Still, Route 66 was designated to go from Santa Rosa north to Santa Fe before coming back to Albuquerque.
And that wasn't viable. It added 4 hours to people's drives.
The prosperity of the Roaring '20s ended abruptly when the stock market crashed October 1929, triggering the Great Depression. Banks failed, industrial production plummeted, and unemployment soared, affecting more than 20% of the U.S. workforce. As the Depression deepened, a separate disaster unfolded in the Great Plains. A severe, decade-long drought converged with decades of poor farming practices. Farmers had overplowed millions of deep-rooted grasses that held the soil in place. When the drought hit and crops failed, topsoil was kicked up, causing massive blizzards of dust, making the land uninhabitable.
We have to keep in mind that these two catastrophic events occurring simultaneously, putting people out of work, forcing them to seek refuge, forcing them to seek a better life somewhere else.
Route 66 became a symbol of hope, gaining the nickname the Mother Road. Victims, often labeled Okies, regardless of their home state, made the journey west to California, a promised land of opportunity and work.
Coming through New Mexico was certainly part of their journey. We see that in John Steinbeck's incredible Grapes of Wrath novel, where he details the Joad family trying to make their way from Oklahoma to California, stopping in Santa Rosa, as he notes.
These travelers weren't always welcome.
They closed the road at night because they didn't want people coming in and camping out in the city of Albuquerque. But in the morning, traffic continued. And he said, wow, Albuquerque, they have an Okie parade every day, as the new migrants headed west would go across it.
These travelers met parts of Route 66 that were dangerous and unpaved. The U.S. Highway 66 Association relentlessly promoted the road, pushing for its improvement. The very crisis that forced these families onto the road ultimately created the mechanism to improve it. Depression-era programs like the Civilian Conservation Corps and Works Progress Administration put millions of unemployed to work, building roads and bridges, even realigning Route 66 to make it safer.
Rerouting it was a matter of just logistics, but also making sure that travelers had an easier time getting through Route 66.
Using Hannett's route from Santa Rosa to Albuquerque, more than 100 miles were eliminated.
Albuquerque has one of the unusual spots on 66 where you can be on Route 66 and Route 66.
By 1938, Route 66 earned the distinction of being the first U.S. highway to be completely paved, bringing businesses like service stations, lodging, and shops to small towns across all 8 states.
But that was just the beginning.
So it was a movement of people, equipment, and materials.
How Route 66 aided the war effort.
If you're going to do that California trip, take my way, the highway. That's the best.
And became a booming tourist attraction for people worldwide. Welcome back to celebrate New Mexico, 100 years of Route 66.
For millions, Route 66 wasn't just a highway, it was a lifeline that carried dreams westward.
But the road's purpose was about to be redefined by an urgent mandate for a nation preparing for the worst.
With the newly paved highway in full swing, the U.S. found itself on the brink of war.
America started to mobilize for World War II in the late 30s. It's what brought us out of the Depression.
Military leaders recognized the western part of the U.S. as ideal for new bases, primarily because of its isolation and dry weather. Many facilities began to pop up on or near Route 66, including an ordnance storage facility at Fort Wingate just east of Gallup.
The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor.
December 7th, 1941, our country thrust into war. The nation's resources were suddenly dedicated to the war effort. Steel and rubber became scarce and gasoline required rationing, leading to fewer travelers and halting automobile production. But Route 66 took on a new critical role.
It's a road to move industry and business, the equipment that are needed to build ships, for example, for artillery.
Becoming a vital transportation line for supplies from the Midwest and East to massive new factories on the West Coast.
California was a center for industrialization. It was a center for the aircraft industry.
The U.S. invested $70 billion to support new industries, creating a demand for workers.
Moving people to different parts of the country, to Los Angeles, for example, to work in the shipyards for World War II.
Dramatically increasing the populations of West Coast states by nearly 40%.
It's a movement of people, equipment, and materials.
Route 66 is responsible for more than half of all military transports during the war.
As the main artery of really connecting large parts of the country, it was very vital to get things moved quickly, even though you had to stop at all the towns in which it went through.
Fueling the single greatest manpower mobilization in U.S. history, leaving its mark on the Mother Road.
Each truck that passed left a wrinkle on the road.
By 1945, the war ended. New pavement and returning soldiers breathed life back into Route 66.
People were sick and tired of being deprived of gas, of tires, of not being able to drive somewhere.
Winds from Chicago to L.A.
In 1946, Bobby Troup wrote the song that would bring everlasting fame to the roadway.
Get your kicks on Route 66.
Rolling Stones are recording it. Willie Nelson is recording it. Chuck Berry is recording it. So it becomes part of American popular culture for each era, the 50s, 60s, 70s.
Middle-class America, where we have more disposable income, car culture really takes off, and so the ability to purchase a brand new, fill in the blank, whatever car that folks had access to, piling the kids in the car.
The family road trip became an American rite of passage.
It became a place where people could plunge into a road and it just took you.
There was 2-lane, you went through every little town, and we'd stop here and there, and, it was an adventure.
They were going to have to stop and stay somewhere. They were going to have to stop and eat, and they were going to have to stop and get gasoline.
We suddenly had tourist courts that became motels, that became hotels.
It certainly created an economic boom, not just for New Mexico, but for every state that the route went through.
You would find and discover things you could never imagine.
Like quirky roadside attractions.
We had an amusement park near Tijeras called Little Beaver Town, and it was kind of a Wild West little amusement park.
Cobras aren't really popular in this part of the world, but there was a cobra farm that people remembered all their lives because they'd never seen such a snake here.
Traveling 66 was about slowing down, discovering hidden corners, and connecting with locals in every town, opening an avenue for cultural exchange.
One of the things that was sold here was what I would call our local exotic, right? Our Native American cultures, Hispanic cultures, and that was very different to a lot of travelers that were coming.
And yes, it changed them phenomenally because they found themselves for the first time talking to New Yorkers.
Trading posts that popped up along Route 66 and throughout Albuquerque, selling Native American jewelry and different kinds of arts and crafts to tourists, and really making a tourist market out of those local artisan, right, creations. Different kinds of food, our red and green chili, of course, tortillas and beans.
But the experience may not have always been authentic.
So the traditional culture actually shifted to match tourist lore. There are no tomahawks out here in our part of no wigwams. But if tourists wanted a rubber tomahawk, people would sell them a rubber tomahawk.
Gazing out the window in wonder while cruising the highway.
I think people were captured by the beauty that we have here.
Spectacular canyons and mountain ranges that it crosses.
Stopping in Santa Rosa to go swimming.
But not everyone had an easy ride.
It's a terrible part of American past.
In the mid-century, African-American travelers faced widespread discrimination.
Not everybody had the freedom to stay where they want, travel where they want, eat where they want.
Almost half the counties along Route 66 were what's called sundown towns, a place where African-Americans were not allowed out after dark.
African Americans had to travel on 66 using the Green Book.
It identified several locations within Albuquerque, several locations throughout New Mexico that were safe haven for these travelers, where they could have room and board, they could eat, right? They could enjoy themselves and not feel like they were unwelcomed.
A necessary tool in a deeply segregated nation.
We need to acknowledge that, and we need to learn from that.
At the same time, Route 66 saw the beginning of the end.
The interstate highway system was an act by President Dwight Eisenhower in about 1956.
He decided he would model one a little bit after the German experience in the Autobahn.
Launching an engineering marvel spanning nearly 3 decades.
Make travel faster, make travel easier and more direct.
That would tear the economic heart out of America's main streets.
Traffic was diverted away, those dollars were diverted away from Route 66. And that created a lot of hardship for our smaller communities, our smaller towns. What was once a population of maybe 50,000 had reduced to the hundreds.
Finally, in October 1984, the interstate system was complete, and the following year, the Route 66 designation as a U.S. highway removed. But its story doesn't end there.
A lot of people started to think about what that road in particular meant for the country, what it meant for them personally.
It's a family thing, a generational thing, and people want to carry that on for people not even born yet.
There's a sense of ownership about Route 66, which is very deep.
The story of Route 66 didn't end with its decommissioning.
Local communities and the people who lived there immediately began working to save what was left.
They formed associations, lobbied for historic Route 66 signs, and fought to protect the unique architecture and history from the wrecking ball.
When Route 66 ended, there was a revival movement from 1985 on, and it became something that Americans became proud of.
They maybe had childhood memories, vacations, traveling Route 66. It mattered to people. It made our communities what they were and what they are today.
The whole Mother Road through all 8 states is an actual playbook of the United States history.
Melissa Beasley Lee is the president of the New Mexico Route 66 Association.
We promote tourism. We also educate people on the importance of Route 66.
Today, preservation efforts are often focused on communities struggling to maintain their historic buildings and iconic neon signs.
It's so vital to preserve what you can for generations to come.
She understands the importance of saving these places.
We have a lot of businesses coming to us and they are in need. They're small mom and pop businesses. It's hard for them to survive and it's just not feasible for them to get that kind of funding. So we help them find that. It's really exciting on a preservation project.
Her efforts are hands-on.
About 2 years ago, Tucumcari was destroyed. All of their neon signs were destroyed by a hailstorm.
She secured funding to resurrect more than a dozen iconic signs.
We had a neon professional from LA that flew in.
The neon has to be tight enough to not fall off, loose enough to do what it needs to do.
We wouldn't have been able to complete the job without him. Now, to be able to drive through town and see them all lit up and think, wow, I played a part in that and I helped to make that happen. It's really a great feeling.
Restoring their glow and preserving these landmarks not only for Americans.
It is a road for the world. People come here from all over.
Seeking the open road, the adventure, and the freedom it represents.
It's part of our identity. It's a part of what makes America distinctive.
Route 66 is a whole melting pot, if you will, of stories, of people's lives.
As we cruise into 100 years,
I'm hoping to focus on other stories that we don't often hear, right? The stories of immigrant families, of refugees that settled in the International District on Route 66, right? Some of the businesses that were established then but continue to survive to this day.
100 years from now, I'm hoping that there's some of this left so that people can learn from it.
Route 66 reminds us that America is a process, a constant journey of building, changing, and enduring.
A living symbol of all the parts of America.
And the best part of that adventure remains, and will always be.
The people you meet along the way.
This year, we are committed to sharing the stories of those people.
This celebration's across our state and how communities are coming together to preserve its important legacy.
Route 66 is a story of migration, war, racism, freedom, and the ultimate American road trip.
It represents a history that's constantly changing, from a dirt path to a concrete symbol, and finally, a cultural monument.
Its importance lies not just in what it was, but in what it continues to connect. From all of us here at KOAT, good night.